Live here on YouTube. Ben Wittenstein, Nate Jacobson with you as we get ready for week 8 of college football. Nate, coming off week 7, a week for the ages with a lot of top matchups, a lot of fun games. But honestly, you look at this week's slate, this could honestly match up, if not be better than last week.
Yeah, week 7 was awesome. And week 8, there's definitely one game that stands out that we'll talk about plenty on this episode. And I was looking at all our picks for this week, and we're just sticking with the Big Ten and the SEC, which is kind of fitting because I think the two conferences are in talks about a scheduling agreement where they have like a Big Ten SEC challenge, which just kind of separates the Big Two conferences from the rest, which is unfortunate because we like all of college football, and we're seeing some cool stories in the Group of Five with the Heisman Trophy favorite currently playing for Boise State, and then Army and Navy now being undefeated in rank. So we like all of college football, but just the games we find value on this week happen to be from the two big boys in college football.
It's the haves and the have-nots right now. We just have to go with the haves at this point. It's just going to be such a fun weekend. There's so many big games. Don't forget, you can find all of our picks at thegamingjuice.com. But Nate, let's start out as we always do. Let's get on to the plus bus, a money line bet that is plus 100 or greater. There's a lot of options this week, a lot of fun teams that could pull off an upset. We will start with you. What are you looking at?
Yeah, let's start off strong and take Georgia on the money line against Texas. So we'll have more about this game in terms of the totals later in the show, but I just want to get it out there that I will be on Georgia plus the points. That's something I already bet, something I'll write up on thegamingjuice.com. And now that their line moved like an hour before we started recording, where Georgia moved from +4 to +5, so a little bit extra value there. I'm not really surprised by the move because of how these two teams have played and kind of the perception in recent weeks. I mean, a few weeks ago, we talked about the Georgia-Alabama game, and my takeaway from that game was I actually was impressed with Georgia, how they played the second half, and even like just getting on the scoreboard after falling behind 28-0. I was kind of impressed by that. I mean, there's not many teams that have the talent in the country that are able to come back from a 28-point deficit in Tuscaloosa, and they actually led for like 13 seconds until Ryan Williams had that crazy touchdown. So I like what I saw from Georgia there. However, and I'm going to kind of talk about like why this bet worries me a little bit. It's because what has happened since, and that Alabama loss doesn't look good when Alabama goes out the next week, loses to Vandy, and then we beat South Carolina by 2 points. And then Georgia gives up 31 points to Mississippi State, who's the worst team in the SEC last week. So there's some concern with Georgia in that front, but because of all that, it creates a betting opportunity and a bigger number. If none of that happened, this line would probably be south of 3. And it'd be kind of a pass for me, or maybe a little bit of a small Georgia bet. But I do think we're getting some line value based on recent results. And really what comes down to me and why I'm going to bet this is just not fully believing in Texas. We saw Ohio State last week, how we kind of questioned their strength of schedule and not really being tested by a good offense. Well, Texas also hasn't been tested by a good offense at all. On paper, their most impressive wins were against Michigan when Davis Warren was still the starter. And even without him, whoever's their Michigan quarterback is not playing well or this season, whether it was Warren or Orji. So don't really take much in stock into that. And then last week, Oklahoma, we know about all their offensive issues in terms of quarterback and play caller, and then injuries to their wide receiver and offensive line. So we're getting a real test now. I think Carson Beck can have some success in this game, which kind of lends into what I'll have later in the show about the Georgia offense having some success against the Texas defense. So give me the Bulldogs, a team that hardly loses in the regular season, and now we're getting them at a pretty big underdog price.
I do like this play because, like, deep down in my heart of hearts, the spread on Georgia seems like the right move, but I think if Georgia's going to cover the spread, I think they might just win the game outright. It's easier for me to convince myself to just say Georgia wins this game outright than it is to say, oh, well, Georgia maybe comes within a field goal or something like that. I can see it either Texas completely blows them out and we see that just Texas is the best team in the country with a great offense, or Georgia makes it interesting and just wins this game, maybe in a late field goal, or they win it by a touchdown or more. At this point, I think you just bet the Georgia money line like you suggested for best bet. All right, Nate. For me, We're going to go to Arkansas. We're going to go to another SEC school, and we're fading the Storm. And there's honestly two storms to fade in this one, but we're going to fade the more recent storm, and that's the storming that LSU had last week in their win against Ole Miss. Shout out to our guy Colby Marcio for the fade the storm moniker, but I think this is a great spot to fade LSU, and I know you like Arkansas this week. You're going to talk a little bit more about them, but I think I'll just say about this, because you can add on to it later on. This is a game last week for LSU against Ole Miss that LSU maybe shouldn't have even won. Ole Miss really beat themselves in that kind of a game. Even LSU being at home, being a home dog, they had everything, situationally going for them off of a bye, and they still should have maybe lost this game if a couple things don't go their way. Now they have to go on the road after a huge top 10 win, after a field storming, and they have to try to play this Arkansas team that's coming out of a bye, coming after a big win against Tennessee. To me, this sets up as a great play for Arkansas. I know you're going to have and take the points for them, but I really like the money line here as well. So I'll let you explain it more down the road, but I really like the Arkansas play here. Just money line at home as dogs against maybe not as good of an LSU team as we expect.
Yep, more on this later in the show.
Love it. All right, Nate, man, a few words. Let us go to our number 5 play of the day.
Number 5.
We're going to go to the Big Ten. We talked a little bit of SEC, but we're going to go to the Big Ten. We are going to go to Rutgers, laying the 4 against UCLA. Out of all the games this weekend, Nate, out of all the crazy insanity, we have top 10 matchups. We have some big name programs going on. I love a bet in Rutgers, UCLA, and I'm going to take Rutgers laying the 4. This is just a bad spot for the UCLA Bruins. They're coming off a game that they maybe should have won against Minnesota. They were up. They had the lead. They let go of the lead. They lost that game at home. Now they have to travel 3 time zones from California to New Jersey and play a Rutgers team that honestly I think is better than people are giving them credit for. And this is I could talk about Rutgers day in and day out, but this is more of a fade for UCLA in my opinion. They're just not a good team, and we have to come to grips with that. Ethan Garbers has thrown 9 interceptions this year, and not only that, he throws picks, but this UCLA team loves to pass. They're 13th in the country in pass percentage. 58% of their plays this season have been passes on offense. Well, Rutgers, really good. They're 4th in opponent passing success rate. So Rutgers defends the pass really well. UCLA passes a lot. They turn it over, and they're not even that good at passing the ball. So Rutgers at home against UCLA, cross-country flight. We know how bad these teams have been when they have to travel cross-country. I love laying the 4 here with the Scarlet Knights. And by the way, before I end this one, Nate, this is the second time Rutgers has had a back-to-back home stretch, but it's the first since week 1 to week 2. So they're not going to have, the rest advantage, so to speak, but they're going to have a game back-to-back at home. They get that rest, while UCLA has to travel 3 time zones for this game. So a bad team, lots of travel. Rutgers, I think, a little underrated, and they match up really well with this UCLA team. Give me Rutgers laying the 4. Love it.
Yeah, and in UCLA, they kind of were in the perfect spot last week, how they were catching Minnesota off the storm the field win, and Minnesota just probably not good enough to be laying points against anyone, and they blew a lead. So that's probably pretty tough for UCLA, who's played a brutal schedule, but now this is their 3rd cross-country trip, basically, of the season. So, yeah, really tough spot for UCLA. UCLA has taken all the early support, which I think might just be a play against Rutgers, just their offense not being good enough to cover a number like closer to a touchdown like it was. But, yeah, at this number, it would be Rutgers or pass for me. Definitely, if you wanted UCLA, you missed out on the best of it.
All right, I think we're staying in the Big Ten for number 4.
Number 4.
We are, Ben. I hate to do this to you, but I'm taking Nebraska plus the 6.5. If you can get 7, which is what I'm personally waiting for, but I'm fine with taking the 6.5. I got to give Indiana full credit. I mean, Cignetti has done an amazing job with that program. They look like a real college football team. It took a bunch of transfers from JMU and other G5 spots. Curtis Rourke, the quarterback from Ohio, who is very good quarterback for the MAC, and it's translated over to the Big Ten. However, Indiana has been FIU, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, and Northwestern. And it's a really bad non-conference slate. If you look at those 3 teams in the Big Ten, we talked about UCLA just not being a good team this year, one of the worst teams in the Big Ten from a power rating perspective. Maryland, who just lost to Northwestern, is a big favorite, so they're not any good. And Indiana was only laying 7 against Maryland when they played about a month ago in Bloomington. And then Northwestern, a game that was played on Lake Michigan. You always know when Indiana plays in the Chicago area, it's probably 80% Indiana fans, and that might be generous. And I guess win has aged well because Northwestern went out and beat Maryland, but I still don't think Northwestern is a very good team. So now it's a big step, I feel like, for Indiana, laying almost a touchdown against a Nebraska team that is going to be the best offensive line Indiana's played this year, best defensive line that IU has played. And I like what I've seen from Dylan Raiola as a true freshman. He's not the best quarterback in the country, but he does stuff for the Nebraska offense. And he also has the ability where we might see him improve throughout the year as a true freshman coming off a bye week of their own. So, yeah, I like Nebraska here. I just think this is too big of a price for Indiana to be laying because I'm not fully sold. Indiana is a top 15 team. I still think they're definitely top 25 team, and they've passed every test that has come at them. But I just want to see them do it against one of the better teams or a middle tier team in the Big Ten, because really they've just kind of been beating up on the lesser teams. Because I'm not high on UCLA, I'm not high on Maryland, I'm not high on Northwestern. So I'm excited to see what Indiana is. I think you're going to probably learn a lot about them as a proud alum of the school, but
yeah,
it's kind of like, I'll pay to see it. If they can win by 7 or more, then I'll happily take that loss. But I'll take my chances with Nebraska here at a noon local start in Bloomington on Saturday.
I almost am tempted to take the under in a game like this because I think we're getting slightly an inflated number, 50.5. It was 51.5. It came down. I've been very cautious of betting unders for Indiana football because they've scored 31 plus points in every single game this season. But like you said, the competition hasn't been the top notch in the country nor in the Big Ten. So this will be the best defense by far that Indiana plays all season long. So we'll see if they can attack. Rushing, passing, we'll have to see. I'm a little skeptical that Nebraska offense will be able to keep up with Indiana, but we'll have to see how that fares. Maybe it just becomes like an under type of game. But again, it's homecoming. Big new kickoff is there. Indiana off a bye, sold out game. Nate, Indiana's got everything going for this one.
I love that sentence, and I mean, I don't blame you for saying it, but you said I don't think Nebraska's offense will be able to keep up with Indiana. Like if you told me we were going to be saying that going into this year, as much as I was pretty bullish on Indiana in terms of Cignetti, he's a very good coach. He's very no nonsense guy. He's as he said, Google him. He's a winner, or he's won everywhere he goes, or however.
That's all he does.
He said that in an interview. So yeah, I could definitely see myself being wrong here, but I just, from a price perspective and probability, which is all kind of what betting is, Nebraska definitely is the side I'm looking at for that game on Saturday.
All right, let's move on.
Number three,
Nate, we're going to go back to the SEC. We're going to go to Alabama and Tennessee. Well, Rocky Top. And I'm going to take Bama, laying the points. -3. This number started at -1 for Bama. That got bet up, -2.5 for a bit. Now it's sitting at a field goal. I still like it. I don't know if I would go higher than a field goal for Alabama, though, Nate. I do really like them at -3. I love them at -2.5. But to me, kind of like how I faded UCLA in their game against Rutgers, this is me fading Tennessee and their offense. Their offense just has not looked good over the past couple of weeks. They came out big. They started out hot. Nico was like the guy, and people were talking about how he's this newcomer quarterback. He's going to be great for Tennessee, and he was good. But now he's kind of come back down to earth. He's plateaued a little bit. He hasn't thrown a touchdown in 2 games, Nate. He's coming off his worst start of the season. His quarterback rating was 17 or something last week. It just wasn't good. He's not in the right spot that he was back in week 1 and week 2 of this season. The Bama defense also, he's going to be home, but he's facing a Bama defense that's pretty good. And we could talk about how bad Bama's offense has been this season. They've been disappointing, but their defense has been still a pretty formidable opponent. It's going to be tough for Nico Iamaleava to be able to play against this defense. They're top 50 in sacks per game. They're second in opponent passing success rate. Teams struggle to pass on this Alabama defense. And rushing-wise, if Tennessee's going to try to run the ball, they're 68th in rushing success rate. So even running the ball, they're not great. They're going to have to try to pass the ball in this Bama defense, which is really good at defending the pass. And I think Bama, I never want to say they're due, they're not due for a game, but they have struggled their last 10 quarters of football. And I think at some point we're going to see them have a little bit of positive regression in them, but either offensively, defensively. I still think they're playing like a 2 hangover game after their win against Georgia for whatever reason. Nick Saban back in the day could get his teams ready for the next week, but I think a guy like Kalen DeBoer in his first season, he's still kind of figuring out how to maneuver his team after just an absolutely huge upset. I think now they go on the road, they get serious against this Tennessee team. They've had a 2-week buffer between their Georgia game and now. They play a quarterback that's struggling with a good defense. Give me Alabama -3 in this game.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing here is kind of like, which team are you more concerned about? Are you more concerned about Alabama the last 2 games or Tennessee? And I for me, it's Tennessee, because that game against Florida last week was ugly. And if Graham Mertz doesn't get injured and finishes the game, I think Florida wins. And then what's this number if Tennessee is off losses against Arkansas and Florida? And if you look back at what Tennessee's good wins were this season, it was NC State on a neutral week 2. NC State has turned out to be one of the worst teams in the ACC. And then it was that big game against Oklahoma and Oklahoma's SEC opener, first conference game in Norman. It was a big game because Josh Heupel going to play the school where he won a national title at, and they ended up winning, but it wasn't, I don't think they played that well. They hit a couple explosive plays and played good defense, but turns out Oklahoma's offense is very, very poor. So yeah, I don't necessarily agree with you I think Alabama's offense has actually been pretty good, and DeBoer is the reason, or one of the reasons why, with Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams. And I can trust Alabama's offense in this spot. I do worry a little bit about their defense because their secondary is so young. And this is a tough road game. And maybe Nico, who was supposed to be the number 1 quarterback in his recruiting class, can kind of turn things around and play up to his potential in a pretty quarterback-friendly offense. But with the way he fared the last 2 weeks, I think Alabama's defense actually might be able to hold up here. And if they do, Alabama's offense should be able to score enough. So the more I've kind of been thinking about this game, I'm on your side with Alabama. Not really rushing to bet it at -3, but definitely the way to look, because I do have more concerns about Tennessee over the last few weeks than I do Alabama, just because I don't really think Tennessee has beaten anyone good at all.
No, they haven't inspired confidence in a lot of people, we should say. All right, Nate, I think you got one more.
Number 2.
Yeah, SEC, and I talked about Arkansas a little bit when we were just kind of recapping the Tennessee-Alabama game. And in Arkansas, they're coming off that big win against Tennessee in week 6, and then they had a bye week, got to reset. Meanwhile, LSU played in their game of the year against Ole Miss. They win in overtime, but I watched that game, and I was on LSU +3, 3.5 in that game. And I felt very lucky that I won that game. You kind of look what happened and how the game played out. First quarter, Ole Miss has the ball on their first possession. Jackson Dart throws a beautiful pass to Trey Harris over the LSU secondary. He drops the ball, probably as a touchdown, or at least gets into the red zone, and maybe Ole Miss scores a touchdown there. They ended up getting 0 points. Second possession, they miss a 32-yard field goal, end up obviously with 0 points. Then they get an interception right away. They get down inside the LSU 5, and then they lose yards on a 4th and 1 inside the 5. So it was a really weird game where it felt like Ole Miss should have been up 13-0 out of the gate, and it was 0-0 at the end of the first quarter. But even with all that misfortune, Ole Miss is up 10-0 in the first quarter to start the game. They're leading literally throughout. LSU ties it because they convert a 4th down on the final drive, and then their touchdown actually was also on a 4th down to tie the game with 27 seconds left. That's the first time the game is tied since Ole Miss took the lead or scored their first points of the game. And then LSU doesn't take the lead, or basically LSU never had the lead while taking a snap because their touchdown was a walk-off, down 3 in overtime. Nussmeier to Kyron Lacey, game over. Fans storm the field. Everyone loves LSU now. They're 8th. Oh, what a win. They beat Lane Kiffin and this amazing Ole Miss team who I had my question marks about going into the season. And now I want to fade LSU. You have that storm the field win. I think they were really fortunate to beat Ole Miss because Ole Miss had many times throughout the game they could have put LSU away, and they just couldn't. And now LSU travels to Arkansas, fresh off a bye. Nussmeier made the big throws at the end, but he also was 22 of 51 with 2 interceptions. So I have questions about him. I have questions about the LSU run game. They haven't been able to really find a running back. Their defense did play better under Blake Baker last week, which I kind of expected off a bye. But Are we going to have another good performance after kind of going all in against Ole Miss? And they still have a lot of flaws on that side of the ball. So, yeah, really like Arkansas here. Make sure to grab the last +3s that are out there. It's moved to a lot of books up to +2.5 earlier on a Wednesday. So, yeah, like Arkansas a lot, +3. I think Sam Pittman's team gets it done. I will want to add the quarterback for Arkansas, Talon Green. He left the game against Tennessee 2 weeks ago, but from all reports say he's on track to play for this game. So if you are a little bit worried about that and you're listening to this late, just make sure that he's on track to play still, because we don't quite know exactly with college injury reports. I know there's some injury reports in the SEC, but those tend to be vague. So yeah, Arkansas definitely the side here, mostly a fade, I guess, on LSU, who, as I pointed out, was very fortunate last week.
Yeah, you're going to get no argument from me on that one. As you know, I like the Arkansas money line just straight up. Don't forget, you can sign up for a free account on thegameandjuice.com. You can read Nate, myself, Brad Evans, Joe Lago. Everyone's involved. We got a lot of betting. We got some NBA coming up as well. I'll have some NBA bets. We got some NHL bets from Brandon Velasquez. So we got you covered. Football, basketball, hockey, whatever you need. Sign up for a free account on thegamingjuice.com. All right, Nate, for our final play of the day.
Number 1.
We are going to go to that Georgia-Texas game. Now, we don't have necessarily super competing bets, but we have kind of bets that are semi-opposite. For such a big game, we figured we might as well make this the number 1 play. Georgia going to Texas. You mentioned Georgia money line, so I know you like that, but you have another play in this one that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I like the full game over at 56. I talked a little bit about liking Georgia's offense and Carson Beck here against a Texas defense that going into this season, there was a lot of question marks about. They lost a couple guys on the defensive line, Byron Murphy being one of them, who's now on the Seattle Seahawks. He was a first-round pick. I can't remember the other guy's name off the top of my head, but I know he's on the Titans, and he was also very good in terms of like run stuffing and just being an interior presence. And then Texas secondary. I mean, we remember last year in the college football playoff semifinal watching Washington just pass all over that Texas secondary. But there hasn't been a passing offense that has had that ability to kind of expose the Texas secondary. And I think Georgia is definitely the first opponent on their schedule that has at least the ability to do that. And I mentioned some of my concerns about Georgia's defense. And I mean, I still bet Georgia as an underdog because it's all about price for me. But from a matchup perspective, Quinn Ewers against a Georgia defense that just gave up 31 points to Mississippi State. That's a little bit concerning about Georgia's defense. They have a lot of talent, but in terms of just production, it hasn't been so pretty for a unit that's coached by Kirby Smart. So, and just thinking about this game and how I think it's going to be played in the game state, I feel like there's going to be points here just because I like both offenses more than both defenses, which is kind of a crazy thing to say because when you think of Georgia and Texas, and especially Georgia, they're usually involved in these big games that are kind of like low scoring, nip and tuck, conservative. No one wants to make a mistake, but I think Texas definitely has the ability to move the ball here, and Georgia has the chance to counter. We saw last week, Oregon, there was a lot of questions about their offense, and they were able to expose Ohio State's defense a little bit that everyone hyped up being so good on paper. Texas definitely has a lot of talent on defense, but they haven't been tested, and I think Georgia is going to be able to do that, and because of that, this game will go over the total of 56.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could honestly win both of our bets if the first half it's 28.
SGP.
You could definitely be, you get SGP. It just
SGP with the Georgia money line.
Honestly, I might as well. You might as well. I mean,
there's probably a sports book out there that'll have a boost on like a 3-leg SGP, and I don't like doing SGPs in college because I just don't know enough about the player props to get involved and feel comfortable. But if you can maybe make a little bit of a game script SGP where you talk about your bet hitting and then my bet hitting, throw in the Georgia money line to really juice that ticket up, then we might be cooking.
The Fade 5 SGP. That's honestly, if we did that before, we would have hit a lot of bets. We'd be rich guys. Our backgrounds would be pools. We'd be out in Europe. It'd be some great backgrounds if we did some SGPs. But honestly, I think, the first half under for me, this is very much more of a statistical play, to be quite honest. I mean, the Georgia first halves have been very low scoring this season. They've gone under in 4 of their 6 games in the first half. They average 21.6 points in first halves of their games this season. Texas first halves, they've been a little bit more high scoring, but still under this number at 28 points. And honestly, they've played a lot worse defenses than Georgia, and they still have managed to stay under this number on average. So to me, that kind of signals, I think, in a big game like this, I think we're going to see the teams somewhat feeling each other out a little bit. And I know Kirby Smart has worked. I mean, he's had this game scheduled all season long on his calendar. So I'm assuming he's been working towards game planning for Quinn Ewers, game planning for this Texas offense for a couple of weeks now. I mean, everyone and their grandmothers know that Texas passes the ball. They're one of the top 15 teams in terms of passing yards per game in this country. Georgia's going to be ready to defend it. And I know all the other teams prepared for their passing game, but they're not really on the level that Georgia is defensively, just in terms of talent. And Georgia's not having a great defensive year, but I still think this will be one of the better defenses that Texas has faced all season long. So it may take a quarter, maybe two, for them to get adjusted, make some adjustments, whatever it may be. Keep that score under 28.5 in the first half. Also, Georgia, I don't know if they'll be able to contribute to the scoring, at least in the first quarter. They're one of the worst first quarter scoring teams in the country. They're 99th in the country in first quarter scoring. They just don't start games very hot. So maybe Georgia's a big reason why this hits the under as well. This offensively, they can't score. So combining Georgia's inability offensively to score with Texas's maybe adjustments needed first half, first quarter type of thing against a Georgia defense that I think is going to be ready for this team, I'll hit the under in the first half at 28.5, and only 28.5. There's some 27.5s. I wouldn't go lower than 28.
Yeah, I mean, one reason I believe on Georgia still is how they played against Clemson, and that win looks very good with how Clemson has played. But back in week one. But if you think about what happened that game, I think Georgia was only up 6-0 at halftime before they figured out the second half. So their offense has taken a bit to get going. So yeah, I'm not going to bet against that, especially getting 28.5, because there's a decent chance, or a more likely chance, that this game lands on 28 than a lot of the other potential outcomes. So yeah, I'm not going to talk you out of this one. And maybe I know on some big games like the Super Bowl, we'll see will it be higher the first half scoring or the second half scoring? Yes. Maybe the way to go is just bet second half to be higher scoring than the first half.
Absolutely. All right, Nate, it is bonus time. We got 2 bonus bets for the weekend. We got the little jazz hands going. You want to start out with this one? We stay in the great state of Illinois. I know Brad's going to be happy with you.
I'm just doing this in honor of our boss, Brad Evans, and let's take Illinois plus the 3.5 against Michigan. I just don't really believe in this Michigan team. I do think their offense at least has a better chance of having success in this game because they're going with Jack Tuttle. But Jack Tuttle, you kind of know what he is. He's been in college forever. And I think that Michigan has some real wide receiver issues where even with Jack Tuttle, it's not going to be a pretty offense. And Illinois, they got out to a huge lead last week and then needed overtime to beat Purdue. So that's kind of concerning. But maybe they were overlooking Purdue a little bit and focusing on this game being a CBS 2:30 start. So kind of a national spotlight game. So I think that Illinois may have been looking ahead, wasn't totally focused on finishing out Purdue. And because of that, we're getting a nice price discount on the Fighting Illini against a Michigan team that I have questions about their offense, even with Tuttle as quarterback, and then defensively under Wink Martindale have not been impressed with that unit. It's been a huge regression from the Michigan defense. So yeah, I like Illinois here. And now as I kind of think about this game and talk about it out loud, maybe go with the over here, just because I don't really love the Michigan defensive coaching. And then if Jack Tuttle maybe provides them a little bit more life on offense, and an Illinois defense that gave up a lot of points to Purdue, maybe we see some points in Champaign on Saturday afternoon. But in terms of the bonus time, in honor of you, Brad Evans, hola amigo, give me Illinois plus 3.5.
Mas tequila for Brad Evans for this game.
I'm sure he's going to be well liquored up for that game by Saturday afternoon. Hopefully he's there.
Going for the IL. That's true. I'm sure he's going to be in attendance and certainly enjoying himself with the drinks. Nate, I will stay in the Big Ten for my bonus bet of the weekend. We're going to go right back to Iowa. Second week, the Iowa Hawkeyes have been my bonus bet of the week at -5.5. I really like this under 6 as they go to Michigan State and try to play the Spartans. And I think the same thing's going to happen in this game that we saw happen against Washington, which is Iowa just dominates the line of scrimmage, especially offensively. They were able to bully that Washington defensive line into submission and just run all over the Huskies. And it was a really bad spot for Washington. We don't necessarily get like a situational spot for Iowa and Michigan State here, but I don't think Michigan State's defensive line is going to be able to keep up with that Iowa offensive line. I think Iowa's going to be able to do the same exact thing. They're just going to run the ball on Michigan State. And I know Michigan State's run defense is a little better than Washington's run defenses. They're at home as well. So, betting an under on this game, I don't think is the wrong move, but I think we see a game where it's like 17-9, Iowa wins by 8 kind of thing. This is kind of a gross, low scoring type of game setup that we like to see in the Big Ten. Michigan State just cannot score offensively, and especially with how good Iowa's defense is, I can see them struggling for the entire game to put the ball in the end zone. So give me Iowa laying the 5.5 on the road. It's not a perfect number, nothing sexy, but I think it's a low scoring game that Iowa just is able to extend and run away with in the end because of their running game.
Yeah, nothing too much to add on that other than, if Iowa can get their ground game going, Michigan State just doesn't have the beef up front to stop that.
Yeah, that was me running, by the way. That was, if no one knew. Nate, I think that'll do it for us for a fun week 8. You have anything else to add? Anything you're thinking about?
I think we covered all the Big Ten games this week. Maybe we missed one or two. I'm sure there'll be some more we talk about that's one of the best conferences to discuss. I guess we forgot to talk about USC Maryland, but we don't have to talk about that. But it's also nice that we're wearing long sleeves because it kind of shows that the college football season is getting not down to the wire, but now we're past the halfway point of the regular season, and that's a lot of fun to think about and how fun this sport is going to be over the next few weeks and couple months.
Yeah, once it's flannel season, the Big Ten, SEC, all the football gets real good. So that's how flannel season means good football season.
For sure.
All right, we want to thank everyone for listening. Don't forget, rate and review us. You can follow us on Twitter. Our handles are down there. Our handles are on the side right here. And you can also go to thegamingjuice.com. Sign up for a free account. I'll read Nate, myself, Brad, all of our picks, all of our bets. It's all free. FRE, that's the best move for everyone. So good luck to everyone this weekend, and we'll be back with you all next weekend for some more fun.